Welcome to the Elevate podcast. Melinda Gates has said when women are in leadership, the whole world benefits. Today's conversation showcases the truth of that statement. Hello and welcome to another episode of Elevate, a Women's Leadership Institute podcast. We have the one, the only, Robyn Cohen with us today. She's been tricky to get, but I'm so excited about our conversation today. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Robyn is the Senior Vice President at Universal Media. This is a role she stepped into recently.
Yep, about a year ago.
Yeah, I'd like to turn it to you to introduce us to that and what you do there. And then also share like a personal tip.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, maybe you love karaoke. Maybe, love roller skating. I don't know what it is, but something personal.
Yeah. So, fun fact about Universal Media for those that don't know. So my father-in-law pioneered shopping mall advertising over 40 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
So when you go into a shopping mall and you see the directory and there's advertising on the other side, that's his invention.
That's cool.
Yeah. So their first company, so it was my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my husband. It was a whole family business. But they had a team, I want to say, of about 15, 18 people. And so they built up their first company to a portfolio of 450 malls across the country and sold it to Clear Channel in 1999.
Okay.
So
that's an interesting partnership.
Yeah. Well, and then it became Clear Channel Malls. So they actually created a division, based on what my family had built.
Yeah.
And so my father-in-law, consulted for many years, and then they actually moved here shortly after the sale. So they moved to Deer Valley.
Okay.
And like all good entrepreneurs, he's like poking around and just checking things out. And funny enough, someone from the Gateway, so good old Gateway, reached out to him, and they got back in the business, I want to say in about 2012. And so now it's more of a boutique portfolio of shopping malls. And unfortunately, we lost my father-in-law to cancer a couple of years ago. Okay. So I've just been kind of looking at, I've been with my husband for 24 years, right? And he got back in the business, I want to say about maybe 7-8 years ago. Okay. So I've been watching things from afar, but not that far, right?
Yeah.
And I just decided that it was time to jump in. I've been watching it just really strategically grow and like what my husband's specifically doing with it. And so, so January of 2024, I jumped in.
Very good.
And right now, actually, so we still have a really strategic portfolio of malls in Salt Lake's our biggest market, but we're also in Boise, Boston, Miami, and newly in Los Angeles, and we're slowly growing. Yeah. And then we are also moving from static to digital. Yeah. As when you drive up and down the I-15, right?
Yeah. Totally.
You're like, which billboard's static and which is digital now, right?
Yeah.
So we're, and that's the same kind of across the industry, right? Is this move into digital and then introducing more programmatic along with like direct sales, all that kind of stuff. So it's been fun for me to be a part of it, and now a part of the growth and kind of watching where the possibility of growth is. And so really, really exciting. So that's what I've been focused on for the last almost year and a half now, along with, other stuff on the side. Yeah. And then
you always have other stuff on the side. Yeah.
You got to have stuff on the side.
I know, right?
And I think that you have to have stuff on the side, whether it's like a hobby or even if it's a side hustle. I just think breaking from whatever that full-time thing is just good for your soul. So I always believe on having something on the side. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you asked me about a personal tip.
Yeah.
Or a personal thing. I mean, I was thinking about this as I was saying my answer. Gosh, I don't know. I would say this. I have always been an avid exerciser. Health and wellness is huge in my life. Yes. I lost my mom to cancer 21 years ago. Yeah. So I was really young. And she was one of the first people that introduced me to like waking up early and going to the gym. And so the fact that someone like her would get cancer was
Right.
kind of mind-blowing to me.
You're like, she did all the things.
She did all the
Yeah.
things, and then cancer still took her
I'm
life.
sorry.
So I think my personal tip is just take great care of yourself, like your mind, body, and your soul, your spirit, whatever that looks like for
Yeah.
someone. And, I always talk about doing movement every day. So I don't say exercise,
I love that.
because not everybody likes exercise or
Yeah.
wants to
And
exercise.
sometimes it has a negative connotation.
Totally does.
Yeah.
So I'm like, movement
Yeah.
every day. What does that look like to
Yeah.
you? It could be a walk, right? It could be yoga. It could be
Yeah.
whatever you want it to be. So that's my biggest thing is some form of movement every day.
I love that. That feels very true to who you are, right? Thank you for sharing that. And it's really interesting. I love that you've had this position to kind of watch this business grow, right? And say, where's it going to go? Yeah, I want to be a part of it. I have things to contribute to it. That's a really cool spot to be in. So I'm excited to watch how that grows for you in the next couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so with movement, you have been all over. You've been in many states, different countries, all kinds of different places.
Yep.
And last year, you were voted as one of Utah Business's 30 Women to Watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when they asked you what your most proud accomplishment was, you mentioned your work with women, how no matter where you are, that's something you always try and focus on. Tell me like the impetus of that or why that's an important part of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, I'm like, speaking of movement, I've moved a lot.
Yeah, you have.
A lot. So for those that don't know, I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, born and raised. And I went to university in Montreal. So I lived there for probably about a good 4 or 5 years. So did, university, but then continued to live there for a couple of years just to work and have fun. And gosh, I'm like, I've lived in Reno, Nevada, Park City, Sao Paulo, Brazil, New York, Los Angeles, spent a lot of time in San Francisco. So yeah, I laugh because I say like movement's important and I've moved a lot.
Quite literally, movement is
literally.
Important. But what a great perspective, right? From all those different places.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe there's like a two-pronged reason why, one, I'm a woman. I'm looking at the history of women, right? Where we've come from, where we're going, in many different industries, and looking at what was happening in tech was one of the first things, right?
Yep.
So I became involved with Girls in Tech when they were still based in San Francisco. And I think actually like they recently just shut down, which was, unfortunate to hear, but they really did make a massive impact. So when I was with them, I was one of the first executive directors. Yeah. And I think that we had grown to maybe a dozen chapters the first year and a half. Okay. I launched the Los Angeles chapter. So this was December of 2008.
Okay.
And really just like blazed a trail there in that city for not just what was happening with women in technology, but because we were on the precipice of so much change back then, right? Because LinkedIn had come on the scene, Twitter had come on the scene. Facebook had just opened up, right? So you didn't need a .edu email anymore, right? It was open to the public.
Wow.
The iPhone, right, was like, it was just a year after, right?
It seems like that was so long ago, but it really wasn't.
It really wasn't. 15, 16 years ago, right?
A different thing.
So I was like, okay, yes, there's women in technology and what's happening there, but then how is technology affecting every industry? Mm-hmm. And so I would have monthly events where we would touch upon what is happening in public relations, like as it pertains to social media, and then who are the women at the forefront of that, right? Looking at what was happening with, let's say the environmental, eco-friendly kind of space, right? Yeah. How is technology affecting that? Who are the women on the So I wanted to open it up much larger than just the lens on women in tech.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning.
Okay.
So because of the success that I had there, and at the time it was kind of like wherever my husband's investors wanted us to be,
That's where you were.
I had, we went, and then I would be like, okay, what's happening with women, in this city, in this community? And so that's why it was both, I'm a woman, and what am I experiencing, and why it was important for me, and then just looking at the city that I was living in, what was happening there, and really just trying to always create a platform to highlight just whether it was founders or executives, in that space.
Yeah.
So it's always just been the thing that I do, and obviously when I moved here, I'm trying to think. When I first moved here, I got involved with womenpreneurs, for those of you that remember. Shout out to Rose Maisner and Stephanie Stetler and Bea Vate. So that was like the first thing that I got involved in, because I was like, okay, well, what are they doing and what is happening here? And then it just kind of grew from there.
I can see that, because as you look at your career, you always seem to be on the front edge of things, looking at the front, forecasting, right, seeing what's going on. And then I also love the idea that you come into a community and say, how can I give? What are they doing here? And how can I amplify and help that?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's a really unique talent that is very admirable about you, because not everybody does that, right?
Yeah.
They come, they do their thing, but they don't necessarily give back to the community. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and I've always looked at it as it's less about me and it's more about shining a spotlight on the women that, take here, for example, W Collective has been through many iterations.
Yes.
I'm like pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID.
Right.
And I want to say that even from the very beginning, it was like, how can we create a hub where we're talking about all things women, right? And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a platform where I was talking about everything that was happening here, right, in terms of women organizations, initiatives, events, who are the prominent women in this community, in every industry, what are they doing? How are they shaking stuff up? So we started as a online publication, and then
the W Collective.
Yes. Okay. And then we moved into doing more events, and then narrowing the focus down to entrepreneurship and women in VC. So we had a pretty good run there in terms of
I remember some of those.
Lots of events. But yeah, again, it was like, let me create an event around a topic. Yeah. And then it's not just about highlighting that topic, but who are the women and men, as I might add, right? Because not many organizations do that. And I have touched upon this a lot, right? I'm always like, the change that we would like to make can't happen just by us alone, right? And then we can't complain about men having these exclusive clubs or, events or whatever that is. And then we go and do the same thing. And it's been like that for a while, Yes. And I think that we could probably do an entire podcast on what that has done to DEI and various other things, but let's put that aside. So it wasn't just about obviously creating a platform for women, but also involving men, because they care and they want to be a part of it. And so if I could invite them to be the moderator of an event or on the panel. So not only was that, and yes, it was like a token man, haha. But the representation of that was important.
Mattered.
And then in terms of who was attending the event, then they would invite their network, and then you would have a blended audience. So it was always really very intentional and strategic.
Very strategic. sometimes when people talk about events, they don't bring in strategy or like, what do you want at the end and then work backwards. And I think that's just a missed opportunity, especially in this space. Because like as the Women's Leadership Institute, sometimes they see the word women's and they're like, well, none of that is for me.
I know. And gosh, in our current environment right now, which, is for some is,
tricky.
is very tricky.
Yeah.
And so just the mere word women right now, it's tough and it's unfortunate, right?
It's unfortunate,
but I think that if we just, keep things as is, but maybe frame things differently, right? Or just use different language.
Marketing.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can hold on to it, and hopefully get back to a place where it matters.
Yeah. Because like you said, we really believe that when we have an event and just women show up, that's awesome. But also to move the needle, we definitely need the men involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's like a humanity piece, right?
Yes.
Not so much a gender piece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. That leads us right into the power of events. Because you've planned a lot of events. You're very strategic about it, which I love. You've also got the Media Dinner Club, which you've started, right?
Yeah.
Why is gathering vital in your experience?
Yeah. So I would say, one, I've been doing events in every single city I've ever lived in. I would say that the only maybe 2 cities, so Toronto's my hometown.
Okay.
I have yet to do an event there.
What?
Montreal, where I went to university.
Okay.
I've yet to do an event there. I've done different events there.
Is that because you want to keep that or just,
you know what?
Just wasn't the time?
It was just that when I finally got into more advocacy type of work, it was in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it was, Toronto, Montreal, New York, then Los Angeles. So that's when I really kind of took off in the event space. Okay. So the cities that, I lived in before, I haven't had an opportunity yet to do something there, but I'm sure eventually I will.
Right.
So it's been a long time, about 15, 16 years of doing this. And I have it like down pat, depending upon the type of event, how small, how large. I kind of have like my template. And so just to give me a bit of background with the Media Dinner Club. So now that I'm in media, advertising, one of my newest connections on LinkedIn, I noticed that she had started a chapter in her city.
Okay.
So I reached out and I was like, tell me more about this.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, what a great way to do something that brings together what I love. Women, events, gathering, networking, all that fun
all
stuff.
Of them. Yeah.
But in my new industry, and the other thing too is I thought like, wow, because we do so much here around, as you know, startups and entrepreneurship and tech, and we don't do a lot of things in other industries. So I thought, wow, like what a great way to gather women that are in marketing and PR, branding, journalism, right? Just a lot of different industries that sometimes are left out, And so I was really excited to be able to bring the Media Dinner Club here. And so I'm the chapter lead, and it's for Salt Lake City and Park City because I live in Heber. So it's like I can kind of go back and forth, right, between the two. And with that said, I think that with events, and I've pulled back tremendously on doing events over the last couple of years for a myriad of reasons. I still think events are very important. I think it's great from a marketing standpoint, a lead gen standpoint. There's a lot of great use cases, right, around events. Obviously, events have evolved, in our post-COVID world. And again, like there are still online events and there are offline events. But I think that the way that people are gathering now is just a little bit different.
It is.
I think it's more intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and again, when we look at events, we as humans naturally love to gather, right?
Sure.
I don't care if you're an introvert or an extrovert. It's true. Like, it's statistically.
I literally had this conversation the other day.
Did you? Yeah. It's statistically true, right? Like, we are meant to.
We need each other. Yeah.
And so, with events, right, it's about gathering. It's about human connection. It's about networking, right? You know, building your network. And I think that it has a massive purpose. It has done wonders for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when I saw the success of what I built with Girls in Tech in Los Angeles, I was like, wow, it just helped me to connect with new skills, right? And just learn more about myself and what I was able to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then because I moved so much, it was a great way to get involved with the community, right? To bring people together, to meet people, right? And so this might sound strange, but wherever I've ever lived, like, I never feel alone because, right, or bored, or, because
there's always something.
Because I build a network. And I think for women especially, I think it's easier for men, not all men.
Sure.
And you could say there are the personalities where we're looking at the introvert versus the extrovert.
Right.
But if I am going to zero in on women, I think we're much more hesitant to put ourselves out there. So I've never been afraid of finding like an event and just going by myself.
And that would scare some women. Just a lot. They wouldn't do it. Yes.
And I think
so. What's your tip when you walk in the room and you know no one? Do you like take a moment in the bathroom? You're like, I got this. I can do this. Like, what is the tip for that really just cold moment?
So when I'm researching events, obviously, when I've moved, right? It's like wherever I've ever lived, right? But even if I'm traveling, so I'll look up an event.
Okay.
I will look up, like where it's happening, the topic, the people that are going to be speaking, right? So I really want to understand all like the key points of the event, right?
Sure.
I definitely prefer an event where when you arrive that the panel is happening soon.
Yes, I hate it when they say it starts at 6, but really it's 7, and you're like, what? When is this going to happen?
Yeah. So I like it where it's maybe about a half an hour buffer in terms of people arriving, checking in, sitting down. Because then when the event happens, obviously it's great content, right? So like I'm absorbing great content, but then I'm looking around the room.
For who you want to connect with.
To who I want to connect with.
Because you've done your research before.
Yes. So I just
so give me your pitch. You go up, you walk up to them and say, and I'm sure this is different depending on whatever, but what's your, so I teach a class of seniors who are graduating college.
Yeah.
And it's all about the elevator pitch right now. So I'd love you to share like what are some pitches that you found work well.
Okay. So the first thing that I do is when the panel wraps, I want to go meet one of the panelists. Why? Because when you're standing waiting to meet that panel, because usually there'll be a gathering of people, right? Then you can meet people as you're waiting.
Right. And there's a purpose in your waiting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can be like, hi, I'll be like, hey, what did you think of the panel? What did you think of the topic?
Really easy topic.
What was a
probably
key
already have
takeaway?
thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Then I get to meet, hopefully I get to meet the panelists.
Yeah.
And then from there, right, when you turn back around, there's still people waiting to meet them.
Sure.
So you can continue to kind of hang out there and meet people, right? Or I'll find little flocks of people. So if there's like...
I love that you call them a little flock. Okay.
So it has to be at least 2 to 3 people or more, right? Sure. But 2 to 3 people is a good number. And I honestly just insert myself. I will not say anything because if they're already talking, I don't want to be rude. Right. So I let them continue the conversation. Right. And naturally they'll be like, well, hi, who are you? So you don't even have to wait. they'll make
like
the
that.
invitation.
Okay.
You know, so those are kind of my tips.
Yeah, those are great tips.
And I really always encourage women, like, especially for business events, don't be afraid and don't be shy. You honestly don't know who you're going to meet for whatever reason. Because I've worked so hard on building my network, that's helped me with jobs. It's helped me with, if it's sponsorships, you know, for events.
Yeah.
It's helped me with sales. It's helped me with other events.
Absolutely.
It's helped me, maybe I want them for a panel that I'm putting, right? There's so many different reasons. But yes, I encourage women, don't be shy.
Yeah.
Get the babysitter if you can. I am not a mom, but I know it's a big deal. Get right. Ask the husband to, hey, you know, come home, right?
Yep.
Whatever you got to do. But if it's an event that you think is really interesting, is going to be valuable for you, go to it.
I love that. And I love also that you're like, here's some tips. It's going to be okay, right? No one is going to know if you went in there and it didn't turn out like you thought it would. Yeah. But one thing that we say in the office all the time is you have to show up. Just in showing up, that matters, because you don't know who you're going to sit next to. But if you don't ever show up, you don't get to grow in that way.
Exactly.
So
that's
a
exactly
great tip. Okay, so one thing that I really appreciate about you is your honesty in a state that can be a little passive aggressive.
Yes.
Because we want to be kind, many of us, and sometimes we feel like being direct is not kind, which is, I don't believe. Right. That's an important thing to understand in the dynamic here. Yep. So you mentioned on International Women's Day just a couple weeks ago, you're like, I am done talking about this, like, people. And then you're like, no, I can't be done. And you listed all of these statistics. Yes. Right? That are still like, there's still more work to do. Yes. So one thing that has been interesting as I've started to talking to people is burnout on people who are advancing social causes. Right. Not just women, but all kinds of social causes. Yes. And when do you know when it's enough? When do we really have to give our help in order to advance these causes? Like, I just love your perspective on that. When is enough enough? Do you tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, I got to tap out for a while? Right. Will you do this? What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah. Well, as someone who has been doing it for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I've probably, honestly, have hit the wall at least half a dozen times. Yeah. Because I get real frustrated. That's one of the reasons why I pulled back on events. I thought to myself, you know, it's just not enough anymore to only bring awareness to it. You just feel like you're banging your head against the wall. And, you know, even today on LinkedIn, right? Yesterday was equal pay day. So I said, yesterday was equal pay day. And I decided I'm not writing about it because why? So that I can vent and complain for year number 10 on like, for what? Right. And I wish I could do more, right? Like I wish there was something that I could do to make change, which is why you get into advocacy, right? Because you hope that you can be a change maker. That's right. Right. And not to, you know, not to say that I haven't made change or that I haven't made an impact. You know I have. Yeah. Just doesn't seem like enough, especially in this state. And I think being honest and direct about it matters. I don't think that you need to be disrespectful, you know, or rude. I still think that you can be respectful, diplomatic, and graceful about it while being like a strong voice about it, or while calling out like the glaring issues. You know, I think that you can. But last year, I did make a real strong stance and I was like, I'm done. Okay. I read a piece where this woman said, enough with these breakfasts and these lunches and these happy hours. And, you know, and
which at one point I'm like, I
really
totally
resonated with me. And it made me feel like, am I a part of the solution or am I part of the problem?
That's a good question to ask.
Because if we're only ever bringing awareness to it.
Yeah. And how do you measure awareness, really? And
Well,
education.
that too, right? But then I'm bringing awareness to a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So then I feel like, are we then perpetuating the problem rather than actually making meaningful change? And I will call this out to like everyone out there. I think it's something for all of us to think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've kind of pulled back, and I will still use LinkedIn, Instagram and my other platforms, because if I can maybe talk about it in a different way that's less about focusing on the problem and maybe focusing on the solution. Like, for example, all of the rolling back of DEI, which is painful, very painful. But I was like, who are the companies that are holding on tight and they're saying, no, we are going to continue to commit.
Yeah.
So I was like, great, let's talk about those companies rather than highlighting
what you want.
Rather than highlighting the companies that are rolling back on it.
Yes.
Right. So I'm trying to be more aware of, okay, how can I maybe talk about this in who is making the change or who's part of the change or which companies are. So that's what I'm trying to look at a little bit more closely rather than only just bringing awareness to the problem on a regular basis.
Because I think we're we were founded 10 years ago.
Yes.
Very different.
Yes.
Than where we are now.
Oh, yes.
Still work to do, but just very different.
Yes.
And I think awareness has grown a lot. It's not like people don't know that this is a thing. So I love that you said that. And it reminded me of Corinne Clark when she was here.
Okay.
And the Women's Leadership Institute has a gender lens. Like, that's part of our mission.
Yes.
But when I asked her something, I can't remember the exact question, but adjacent to that, she's like, I don't have time to think about that.
Right.
I'm going to go in and I'm going to get it done and I'm going to get to the solution.
Yep.
And if that comes up, then I'll address it. But that's not ever what I lead with.
Yep.
And I've thought about that for a long time. Because just to your point of, am I perpetuating the problem?
Yes.
Or even if I'm not perpetuating the problem, how do I amplify all the people who are doing actual work that is impactful in this space? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the position.
Because a lot of times, especially I've seen in this state, people are doing amazing work, but they don't always toot their own horn. So you might not know about it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then also in terms of events, right? So the other reason why I pulled back is, and don't get me wrong, it was always about, and especially because I became much more focused on women founders and women in venture capital. So I wanted to raise awareness of who are the women in this state that are building businesses.
Yeah.
Who are the key women in angel investment, right? Venture capital and private equity. So that was that lens. And I felt like that had more meaning to it. But I was being much more mindful of, because I don't like, and I say this, with like a little bit of trepidation, but I've also just been more mindful of more of those token style events, which again, I recently, walked away from an event that was very near and dear to my heart, and for many, many reasons, like there's a laundry list of reasons why. But I felt like, once again, not enough was happening, right? So it's like, I want to go beyond just raising awareness. And I want to go beyond just like, well, here we're highlighting these women, but like, is this making meaningful change, right?
Yeah, what's the connection, that strategy piece that goes along with it?
Yes.
It's interesting. So we have 1,000 alumni throughout the state.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As well as Elevate Her Challenge companies.
Yes.
Who, many of them are actually doing the work.
Yes.
It's messy and different divisions do it better than others.
Sure.
But there are people doing the work. And I had a representative contact me from the media.
Okay.
And say, who are these people? because we always go to the same women, which is awesome. But there's not even a database in our state of people in the media who could be like, hey, this person is in biomedical.
Right.
And they are an expert in their field.
Right.
Right. So the idea of collecting that so you can see the people who are making a difference, you can see how they're making a difference.
Yes.
I thought that was a really interesting. I mean, someday I'd like to create that when I get the bandwidth, but I think it's an interesting piece.
Yeah. And I agree with that. That I've been asked that a lot,
Okay.
When we first started W Collective.
Yeah.
It was a mix of interviews on women founders and executives, profiles on all the different organizations and initiatives, and then highlighting events that were just beneficial for women. And at the time, someone was like, hey, why don't you kind of like create this database? And I didn't. Then when it came to the focus on founders and VCs, I had so many people say like, you've got to create a database. I will say that I did start a Slack channel. So W Collective has a Slack channel. There's 100 members on there, which is pretty good. Yeah. But again, life and stuff gets in the way. It's not as active as it was, when we first kicked it off.
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to do something with it where, maybe it's not necessarily like a database, but it's just this online gathering place for founders, for venture capitalists, that for events, right? To promote events. Yep. So we'll see. But yeah.
I hear you. Something that's needed. I love giving women and even men, right, a space to claim their expertise and how they're working through this.
Exactly.
And they don't always get that opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk about your mentors, because we know statistically women who have solid mentors or allies, especially early in their career explodes faster than people who don't.
Yeah.
So who are your mentors? It can be personal, it can be professional. Who's someone who really made an impact?
Well, what's interesting is so throughout my whole professional life, I have felt that I actually haven't had a lot of cheerleaders, haven't had a lot of mentors. So I kind of had to look within myself, as well as just get inspiration from women that are doing the thing, to follow in their footsteps, So, I mean, in terms of like strength and perseverance and confidence and all of that, I definitely did get that from my late mother. I would say that throughout the years, just because I've been in the advocacy space in so many different cities, so it's really just the women that I've invited to my events and to hear from them that they've been very inspirational to me.
Yes.
And honestly, these are like bigger names, and that they're really well known, but there's something to be said about their story. Oprah's story is remarkable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like a mentor from afar, if you will, because she's so inspirational. I mean, she's 70. Right. Like, look at her and what she's doing, I mean, she's really remarkable. Right. Sarah Blakely. I mean, her story is incredible. Yeah. Taking $5,000, right? Selling fax machines door to door.
What? I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And then started
That's a tedious job.
Oh, my. Can you imagine?
No.
And what she was able to build. And then how long Spanx was private. Right? Before she ever sold it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just remarkable, right? I mean, even more recently, Poppy. Are you familiar with the Poppy beverage?
She just sold, right?
So you want to talk about another story.
Yeah.
So, and again, unless you follow someone's story, right? You think that they go from like 0 to 60. Right. So they go from like, we started this company and sold it for $2 billion. No, right? Yes. So her and her husband, right? So she had some health issues, right? And started the beverage, but it was called Mother Beverage at the very beginning. It was in glass bottles.
Oh.
And it was the same concept, right? So just
Okay.
like a dash of apple cider vinegar, like sparkling water,
Okay.
and then some kind of like infused, fruit
Flavor.
or whatnot, right? They were on Shark Tank. She was, I think, 9 months pregnant.
Which is awesome in itself.
So if you haven't seen it, look
Go
it
watch
up.
it, yeah.
Okay. So, and then when you follow, her journey, I mean, it's really remarkable, right? Because she's grown this company, Allison, forget her last name, just slipped my mind, right? But has grown this now almost $2 billion company, right? While building a family.
Yes.
So for anyone out there that carries on about women building businesses and family and whatnot, she has now become
Embracing
more of a
and.
pinnacle example of what is possible, right? And there's other nuances there. So I can't say that I've had a really like close mentor, in my life.
Yeah.
I've just followed women so closely and read their stories and keep up with their stories. And that's kind of been my constant and consistent inspiration to keep going.
I think there's a lot of value in that, right? Like being able to see how someone does it. Because my guess is the traditional way of being a mom might not look that way when you're building a business, right?
Yes.
But that doesn't mean it's any less.
Exactly.
And so giving ourselves the flexibility to do it however we do it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of power in that. And to watch other people do that and learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask about your Airstream.
Yes.
Because I love this, right? It feels so free, like aligned to who you are. How did that happen? Is it just from the movement? Are we continuing our movement
I know, right?
theme?
Movement's a big theme in my life. My goodness. So I think back to I'll say this.
Okay.
I was a camper when I was very young, right?
Okay.
But it was more of those like traditional, you go away to camp and it's a cabin, right? So it was like your closest thing to camping.
Yeah.
But I always loved it. It was very adventurous to me. And I also love travel. Travel's big in my life. And so it was probably 2015. So it was a year after we moved here. And, and then of course, like you just see where people are going on Instagram, right?
And you're like, why am I not there?
Yeah, exactly. And as you know, the Intermountain West has some of the most spectacular landscape,
so pretty. Not
not just in this country, but in the world. So we started tent camping. So we did probably a good, let me think now, 4 years of tent camping.
Really?
Yes. So glamorous Robyn is also, I think, like a hippie, by nature. I have like two personas. I have like my hippie.
You're hearing like your jewelry, your leather,
and I've got
you're already...
like my, bougie, like executive woman self, right?
That probably keeps you very grounded.
Yeah. And so when we went camping, when you're tent camping, I mean, you can only kind of like be off grid for so many days when like you need a shower.
Right. Please.
Yeah. So when we went to the RV parks, I just started to get really curious about all these different trailers, right? So I'm like, okay, what are all these different trailers, right? You start learning about Class A's and Sprinter vans and Class C, right? All of that jargon. Yeah. And then, came across an Airstream. And honestly, I think that maybe like in marketing or like online somewhere, like I've seen them, but not thinking too much about them. Right.
Yeah.
Until I was up close and personal and I'm camping in a tent. Right. So I just was like,
like I feel pretty good about this.
So we had started going to the Airstream dealership here on a pretty regular basis because we just wanted to understand like all their different
they're like,
models.
They're back again.
No, I think that was. Like when we would walk in, they'd be like, oh my gosh, they're here again.
But at least you know what you wanted, right? That process is important.
Yeah, like we narrowed it down to Airstreams pretty quickly. one of the most iconic brands out there, period, in any industry, right? Fun fact for those that don't know. So Airstream's been around, I want to say at least from around maybe the 40s-ish. And almost 70% of all Airstreams that have ever been built are still on the road. Think about that. It's remarkable.
Wow.
So that's also a testament to the craftsmanship, right?
Absolutely.
To just how well they're built. So we narrowed down to Airstream pretty quickly, right? Pandemic hits, right? Then we're like shut off from the world. But we were like, well, what better thing can you do right now but to camp?
But to go out,
Right? And we would gather friends and be like, hey, like let's right, because you could just be outdoors and still connecting with people, right? And being safe, you know.
Of course.
And so let me think. It was July of 2020 when we bought our Airstream, October of 2020 when we picked it up. Our first trip was to Zion National Park just to kind of, you know, test drive it, right? And then because, and my husband would back this up, you know, I'm very adventurous and completely fearless. So our second trip out ever with the Airstream, we did a cross-country trip from Salt Lake to Miami.
How fun.
It still to this day, one of our most enjoyable trips. So it's the heart of the pandemic. It's December 2020, January of 2021. Okay. And may I say, it was very interesting when you were going from like blue states to red states. What was happening with COVID? It was fascinating. I'll tell you this, Florida was having a good time because everyone was outside. You know, it's warm outside and whatnot. But yeah, we did kind of what I call a kamikaze trip. So we drove 6 to 8 hours every single day to get across the country. And then we were in Florida for about a week and then same thing on the way back. So it was a 3-week trip total. Absolutely incredible. Got to know our Airstream real well. Great. To me, it's still the best way to see this country is road tripping.
100%. Because you could stop in like the local gas station. You're like, oh, what do they sell here? How are the people? Like, I love that part of road tripping. So it's like if you love road tripping, but maybe you don't want to, you know, buy like a whole rig or whatnot. So you can rent one or whatever that looks like. But it really is the best way to see the city. So to this day now, I think we've done almost like 60,000 miles. We've gone to 12 states. We even lived in it for a couple of years straight, which was fun and crazy all at the same time. And now with the business, so with our media business, great way to not only like scope out new properties, right? Even like we just did an installation in Los Angeles. Guess what? We didn't have to stay at a hotel. We didn't have to rent an Airbnb. Yeah, I love this mixing of like
it's great.
Your passion and what you love along with your business.
It's great.
Right?
So it's like
that.
Mobile home office hotel. So we didn't think that far ahead with it, right? It just happened to be like, oh wow. Great way, you know, as we've been kind of building different partnerships, you know, and whatnot and relationships, right? They're like, well, hey, why don't you come out and see our property? We're like, sure.
And we'll stay for a couple days. You just make friends across the country, wherever you go. Maybe we'll do an event. Maybe we'll do this.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I love that you are you.
Thank you.
That is so powerful. As we wrap up to our demographic between like the gender lens on the modern workplace and especially leadership, how would you say we make that change, that lever to say things actually are progressing? What can we each do?
So you're thinking about like when we're talking about leadership in general, but leadership as it pertains to women.
Women are just organizations, right? Embracing retention. What is good for people? Not just women, but everyone.
Right. So I think a couple of things come to mind. One is I think what we have not done very well, and this is everywhere, is just created a solid pipeline, to evolve in your professional sphere.
I can see that.
And obviously, when we look at the numbers in terms of women representation, right?
Yeah.
Whether if it's like C-level executives, board of directors, that
Yep.
kind of thing, right? I think that there is something to be said about obviously looking within, right? So looking at your base
Yeah.
of employees and what are like the programs and whatnot that you can build and create to create that internal pipeline, but obviously being mindful of what that looks like to also recruit from the outside,
Of
right?
course.
I mean,
Yep.
it's a mix of both.
Yeah.
And gosh, you guys know that better than anyone else.
Yeah.
So creating that pipeline, I think, is like massively important, right? I think there's something to be said. I'm going to throw this out there. I've said it before,
Okay.
but there's the pipeline like within an organization, but
Yeah.
then there's also the pipeline when we're looking at younger women, right? So if we're looking at the high school, college age
Yeah.
women, right? Like for example, women who succeed, I think that they do a great job of kind of like bridging that together,
Absolutely.
right? That
Yep.
whole mentorship and whatnot,
Yeah.
So I think there's something to be said about corporations and businesses taking a more active role, if you will, with educational institutions, whether it's like internships or mentorships or whatnot.
Yeah, even pre-pipeline.
Pre-pipeline, right? So it's like, how can you get involved with, maybe it's like a summer internship, I mean, I think there's a lot that we can do where we're giving those experiences to women at a younger age, right? And then maybe even identifying talent then, right? And then it's like, how can we mentor that so that when they graduate, we hire them? I think there's something to be said about that.
Especially in, I feel like the workplace is evolving quite fast right now.
Yes.
Generationally, with AI, technology, all the things. And so to identify talent, support them, and then bring them into your organization, I think is a really wise strategy.
Yeah. And then it's also like, a lot of corporations and businesses do lunch and learn.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that in universities and high schools where, corporate...
What's the return on investment? Yes.
But
absolutely.
Right? Because it's almost like we always say, like, you can't be what you can't see.
100%.
So if corporations and businesses took a more active role then, I feel like then we're inspiring the younger generation to maybe tap into what they want earlier.
Yeah.
So there's the internal, but then there's the generational.
I can see that.
And that to me, I think, is honestly an untapped market, quite frankly. So I don't know who's going to come up with that.
If you have any ideas, DM us.
Yeah. So those are two things that I think about. And then also I just think it's about how do we continue to educate people in general.
Yeah.
All ages.
Yep.
All genders, right? On the importance of, why do we want to fill these roles with,
absolutely,
right?
Like it's really based in good data.
Yes.
It's not just because we think you should be nice.
I'm like,
It's good data.
contrary to what's going on right now. And I know that DEI has just, I mean, it's honestly mind-blowing to me that we're even here with such a backlash against it.
Yeah, hence the burnout, right? Like, wow.
But whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Data, facts, stats, data, I mean, it is out there, right? Will show that your team, you as a leader, right? Your company will ultimately be more successful, more profitable. Like, so
if we take the political rhetoric out of it, this is a good business strategy to have diversity of thought, diversity of product, right? All those things.
Yeah. And wouldn't you... And maybe it's because I've traveled so much. So maybe my experiences are different, than someone else. But when you've lived in Brazil, right? Like when you've lived in all
Yeah.
these different places, you realize the power of just the world that
Right.
we live in
Right.
with all the different beautiful people and genders and
Yeah.
backgrounds and ethnicities and experiences and skill. So you want it all, right?
Mhm.
And let's not forget age, because that's a part of it
'Cause
as
it's a real
well,
thing.
you
Yes,
know?
it is. Yeah.
So to me, we might be going through this backlash, and maybe it will evolve to something better,
Yep.
right? Sometimes you have to like pull back
Absolutely.
to move forward. I
absolutely.
think, what company was it? One company's changing from DEI to DOI. So it's diversity, opportunity, and inclusion. And I'm like, great.
Yeah.
If you want to rebrand
Semantics,
it,
potato,
as,
potato.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
But if that allows you to continue
Sure.
to like work within those parameters and knowing the benefits of it, great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very good. Thank you so much for taking your time, for speaking
My
with us.
pleasure.
Good luck on all your upcoming things.
Thank you.
And we'll catch up with you later.
Absolutely.